Welcome to the San Jose Hockey Now podcast. I'm Sheng Peng, editor-in-chief of San Jose Hockey Now. I also contribute to NBC Sharks. Find me at Sheng_Peng on Twitter. Not quite on Threads yet, but will be.
And I'm Keegan McNally. I'm the one of the writers at San Jose Hockey Now and the owner of half-wallhockey.com. You can find me on Twitter at half_wall_hockey. I tried to make a Threads and it didn't work out, so that's the highlight of.
Did you not get the special fancy red ticket? You weren't hooked up with the?
No,
with
they did. I don't think I have that many followers yet. I was not hooked up, but
I have like 100 followers on my Instagram, so I don't know. Maybe you just had to get to the triple digits. I don't know.
I actually didn't have one until I tried to make a Thread, so we'll have a regular Instagram.
Well, there you go then, yeah.
Anyways, this week we have lots of good Sharks news for everybody, and lots of exciting prospect scrimmage action that we're going to get into.
Yeah, and let me talk. We're going to also have development camp this week. Talked with Will Smith. We have an exclusive interview with Will Smith. It's going to be a fun one. You're going to learn some different things about him. Like, did you know that he is the great-great-grandson of Charles Comiskey, the White Sox owner?
I did not know that, but I'm going to learn it. We also have some news on free agent signings, as well as some of the trades the Sharks made in the past week. So excited to get into it. How about you, Sheng?
Yep, let's get to it.
All right. So we're going to start with the scrimmage because that seems to be on the top of everyone's mind. It was a 7-4 Team White over Team Teal victory in the second Marchant Cup, I believe.
Yes.
So why don't we go with Team Teal first?
Before we jump into that, though, I wanted to mention that I'm going to share some stuff that we heard from John McCarthy, Barracuda head coach, and Todd Marchant, Sharks director of player development yesterday. After the scrimmage last night, they talked with the media. I don't see it up on the Sharks website. So so we're sort of, sharing some stuff that maybe you guys haven't heard. And so some notes on a few of these players. I'm going to sprinkle throughout sort of our talk about the scrimmage. I do want to caution one thing, though. One thing that I'm cognizant of, that you want to be careful with the praise that you hear in development camp, because they want to give, McCarthy, Marchant, understandably, they want to give praise to everybody.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And some of it is, very, very clear and obvious, and other ones they just want to have guys recognized for the work that they're doing,
right?
That's showing on the ice.
So my focus is going to be sort of on when you ask a question, right, and the top of mind guys that they say. Those are the ones that kind of stood out, and then it's sort of like, yeah, like. Then they remember, but I am the director and I'm the coach, and I need to I need to praise all my children,
Yeah, and also I guess the format of the entire scrimmage, sometimes it lends to more. It's giving a lot of guys an opportunity to shine, just because it's kind of very open and limited defense in some scenarios, so gives a lot of people time to shine, I'd say. But the first player, I think we should.
We're gonna go with Team Teal first, and then Team White.
Team Teal first. You got your cards, Sheng?
Yep, I got my lineup sheet.
I got them digitally behind you. Basically, so the number one player we should speak of is our first round pick from 2023, Will Smith, who was centering the top line for Team Teal. So, Sheng, how do you think Will Smith did?
I thought he did fine. Obviously, he wasn't the star of the game, and we'll get to Quentin Musty in a little bit. But what I saw last night, I saw subtlety, deception, ability to make a tape-to-tape pass everywhere, under duress, and so I saw a lot of obviously what the Sharks saw in him. John McCarthy said, that Smith was somebody that stood out. Just like you can tell the talent is obvious there. And, things that I saw that need to be cleaned up, and they will be cleaned up over the years, right? But a guy that is definitely offense first, like Will Smith, taking a lot of chances with the puck along the wall, kind of there's a carelessness there that needs to be coached out of him. But he's 18 and will be. But you can see sort of those flashes for sure.
Yeah, that definitely. I think Will Smith is the kind of prospect that really, really likes to dictate the pace of a game.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
He likes to find his way through a defense. And in the beginning of the scrimmage, I could tell that he was just trying things. He was like, maybe I can get around this guy, maybe I can't, but he's going to try it either way.
Right.
And towards the end of it, he started to get a little bit more like reading his defense, and that's kind of the player that he is. He's just very confident with the puck, and he's really good at controlling the pace of play. And he got more comfortable as the scrimmage went on, for sure. There was that interaction with him and Musty about the whole slashing thing.
Right.
An interesting interaction. I honestly cannot remember. Like, I think a couple years ago we had a fight in a prospect game or a development.
Yeah, I don't remember who was between, but
me either.
Yeah,
but
no, this was a fun one though. Yeah, that
Yeah.
little slash there. I'm glad that I noticed it because I saw it and I wasn't sure it was Smith, but I was pretty sure. And I asked around, and no one was sure. I want to shout out actually Victor Nuno. He does. Should have looked it up. Actually, I'm sorry before we talked. So my preparedness here for that isn't high. But Victor, if you're listening, I met Victor actually at the draft, and I've been on his podcast. What Keegan?
I think it's a fantasy hockey.
Yes, thank you. No, I found it. Yeah. So he is with Dobber Prospects now, and he co-hosts Fantasy Hockey Life, I guess is the podcast. I've been on it a couple of times, and also too co-host of the Dobber Prospect Report podcast. But I just want to give him a little shout out because he's the one that confirmed to me that it was indeed Will Smith that slash Musty, which gave me the confidence to kind of Josh both of the guys about that afterwards. And
I think it was his slash that led to the modified breakaway penalty shot, which led to his goal.
Right. And so so that was a great little moment at the end there. I actually want to give one more shout out too. Actually, Josh Fragellin, who you guys know from San Jose Hockey Now, wrote a lot during Dev Camp, and he's the one that actually, because Musty came in and talked with us, right, and then he sat down because he had to wait for Smith for something they had to do afterwards. I think some social media stuff. And anyway, it was Josh that sort of teased Quentin. Asked Quentin if he wanted to ask a question of Will Smith, and so I don't know if that's what prompted Musty to ask. And didn't get the video of Musty's question. I wish I had, because the video or the question was great. But Musty asked, is that the kind of player you are, Will Smith? That you slash people? Are you a dirty player? Is that your game?
Puts him right on the spot.
Puts him right on the spot. And I was able to capture Will's reaction, which was great, because Will's reaction was, and you can see it on my Twitter. Will's reaction was, "You want to fight?"
Is this an invitation? Are we fighting? Yeah, I think that was amazing.
That was a good moment. But
they definitely took it pretty serious, I'd say. I would think like both sides. It was pretty tight competition in terms of they were out there skating hard. It wasn't like some prospect scrimmages where you're like, oh, they're kind of going, or some sort of basically exhibition games where they're not really trying very hard. No, it seemed like it was actually pretty competitive between the two sides. So
absolutely.
I think Will's. I think a lot of people were expecting Will to have 15 goals and 7 assists by the end of the game, and I'm
sure Matvei Michkov would have had 15 goals and 17 assists.
Yeah, I know, but like I think that's maybe what some people were expecting from Will coming in, and I think a lot of it just has to do with A, format, B, completely new teammates, line mates. And then, at the very end, he was, getting into his groove, and he had an amazing shot from in the slot that led to a goal too as well. So he definitely had his moment in the sun. It just took a little while Musty was like out the gates, and we'll get to him in a minute. But
yep.
Another guy on his line, unless you have anything else to say about Smith.
No.
Was Cam Lund from last year, who was the hero of last year's prospect scrimmage.
Sure.
Came out and shot the lights out, and everyone was really impressed with his shot. How do you think he did?
Well, he had another impressive shot. I think that tied the game, or tied. It was a 3-on-3.
Mm-hmm.
For Teal. I would say that maybe was looking for a little more takeover from him, it being his second year, but the shot is there. The size and ability to handle is there too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think there were moments where it could also have just been my brain trying to draw onto Smith on his line, but I was noticing Smith more than I was Lund.
Yeah.
Overall, but again, he does have a fantastic shot, and he does have some decent playmaking off the rush and everything as well.
Smith just demands the puck. Like whenever he was out there, like he was, ahead of the play, trying to get that stretch pass. So he's definitely, like you mentioned, always thinking offense, always thinking, trying to attack through the middle.
Yeah, for sure. The second line center for Team Teal was Theo Jacobsson, which is a 2021 draft pick, I believe. I think he was in 6th round.
He was a late pick, yeah.
Yeah, he's a later pick. He was a kind of a smaller pick. And
I remember sixth round of 2021. You're right.
Yeah, and I remember them just mentioning that he was, like, when he was drafted, a little undersized and a very, very raw prospect in terms of his overall trajectory. I think for me, and I know you have some like quotes related to Theo Jacobsson as well from McCarthy, I felt like he had an actual pretty strong game. I wasn't say he was like, lighting up the score sheet, but he did have some good possession plays, and he felt like he could prolong the play. He wasn't like losing the puck as soon as he got into the offensive zone. I really enjoyed like just his handling skills. I think was probably my biggest standout for him. What do you got?
Well, I'd admit, I circled a few guys. Like usually when I watch a game like this, I every shift I look at one guy. I'm not, because if you try to catch like try to follow the puck, you're not going to see anybody really. In my opinion, actually, there's a book that that I've read from Garrett Joyce, the writer, and he embedded as a Columbus Blue Jacket scout for a year or so. It's something heartbreaks, about draft and prospects and that sort of thing. And also another book by Shane Malloy, Art of Scouting, that I've read. And that's one of the things that they mentioned in the book, that you should just focus on one guy. You
really have to hone your eyes. If you're following the puck, you're not going to get it. Yeah.
Right. So I circled a handful of guys on each team, and so Jacobsson was not one of them. And so I don't want to tell you the guys that I didn't circle, because I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings.
Absolutely.
But I was watching his line mate Halttunen more, which we'll talk about next. But anyway, though, on Jacobsson, though, the one interesting thing that I did hear this week was I asked John McCarthy about sort of the fitness of these, not the fitness, I'm sorry, of like the guys who developed the most in terms of size. And one guy that you saw me mention on Twitter was Ethan Cardwell. And Ethan Cardwell, he was like obviously wider and bulkier than he was last year. And actually, that's what I asked him. I said, Ethan, in the best possible way,
most polite
you look
manner,
much wider.
You look much wider.
Yeah, and that's a compliment, actually, because that's a testament to the work that Ethan has put into it, which I'll talk about a little more later. But anyway, I asked McCarthy, did anyone else have that kind of obvious, wow, you look way different than you did a year ago? And the other guy he mentioned was Jacobsson.
Interesting. Yeah, I think Theo Jacobsson feels like a very Swedish player. Not that, I mean, he is also from Sweden, but
and the name too,
and his name Teal as well. But I mean, his style of play fits like a lot of Swedish professional players that I've watched. And I think it's interesting to see him on a North American ice surface. Like I've only ever seen him in Sweden, and I've never seen him play otherwise. So
right. I think one thing about him, I would say though, and part of the reason why I didn't circle him, so sorry, Theo, was that he hasn't played beyond Allsvenskan, second division Swedish hockey. And last year, I think he had 14 points in 43. I just was looking at before 43 Ospensen games.
Yeah.
So, he's 20. So this is obviously going to be a big year for him, right? To like take up a larger role in Osvenskan and hopefully play some SHL games.
Yeah, I think it's going to be again, he's always been drafted as like that slower project kind of thing as a pick. So it'll be interesting to see where he goes. But do you have words on Halttunen?
Yeah, I did want to say though, if Theo turns out to be an actual NHLer, Keegan saw it first at the prospect scrimmage.
No, he just had some good.
No, if he caught your eye, yeah. I mean, he did something right for you, So,
I got you.
So Halttunen, Halttunen, I think you can see kind of the tools with him, but they didn't come together like they did obviously for Musty. Musty has sort of the same tools in terms of size and and shot, but like Halttunen, not quite there. But I will say though that McCarthy had good things to say about him. Talked about his long, big body, handles the puck well, and then the shot. Obviously, that's why the Sharks drafted him, right? The shot, or that's one of the big reasons why they drafted him. And so I think that was apparent during the practices before the scrimmage. But during the scrimmage itself, there's obvious talent there, but obvious work to be done too.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. He seems like he is very, very focused on getting his shot on net, and honestly, like a lot of times he was creating through the shot, like he was just shooting for rebounds, and like he can get it on net super, super quick. So it's a valuable player to have. It just feels like with his size and his overall ability, you want like a little bit more, maybe, but he's also still extremely young. A lot of that can come later on as well. So.
Right. Next guy that I wanted to kind of mention, I don't know if you watched him too closely, was Michael Fisher.
Michael Fisher. Interesting. What do you got to say?
Well, for me, I feel like, because I was watching him really closely, because obviously he didn't play a lot last year with his knee injury, only got into 14 games. But before that, though, before going into last year, I think he was really seen as like a sleeper.
Yeah, for sure.
For the Sharks, like a fantastic. I think he was a 4th round pick. A fantastic, third round pick. He was a fantastic 3rd round pick. A guy that a lot of like teams were looking at. Around the range where the Sharks picked him. So I think that there's still like a rustiness to his game, right? Like the Gurry at Fisher pairing was in a bit of trouble a couple times last night, and not quite seeing the sort of
I think I think the offensive side of it hasn't really translated. Like there's obvious, like his skating is great or good for his size, and he can move fairly well. He's a right shot, and he's got like what you would want out of it. But then I think there's some like slower decision making offensively that kind of limits him at the current level. And you're right, he didn't stick out on that pairing as like Guriev is going to be your big physical defenseman. You've got to be the guy who's going to move the puck and make something happen with it. And it just didn't click, I don't think, for their pairing.
Yeah, again, this is just one game, and with a like you mentioned, a funky format: 5-on-5 for a period, 4-on-4 for a period, 3-on-3 for a period, and then a shootout. So
yeah, but the other pairing that was on that team, I think, might have been my favorite pairing of either team. It's one. I mean, that one, or we'll talk about Team White in a minute, but it was Luca Cagnoni and Eric Pohlkamp. I think. Both of them are 5'10", 5'9", 5'10".
Cagnoni is listed as 5'9", and Pohlkamp is 5'10". So
a little
for
undersized.
the big narrative from this weekend, the size narrative from this weekend. Remember, the Sharks drafted 3 straight defensemen in this recent draft. None of them taller than 6'1". I think Axel Lander is 6'1". So
yeah, I think Axel Landon's kind of like that.
Landon,
physical side of it, and Cagnoni and Pohlkamp are more your puck movers. But how did you think they did, or one specifically? If you had a
I will say that Cagnoni was not circled by me, but I noticed him though. And I to some degree, I also, besides the very high picks, I avoided circling the most recent like 7th rounders, 6th rounders, 5th rounders, right? Because I just sort of expect maybe they won't be that good. This is their first, like they just came out of college or 18 or whatever they came out of, right? And so I don't place too much expectations on them, unless obviously it's a Will Smith, a top pick like that. But I'm more interested in sort of the second and third years and whatever, because I expect them to really dominate, really command, establish themselves in a game like this where they're the older, more experienced, et cetera, right? But I would say with Cagnoni though, I was very impressed with this sort of escapability consistently.
For sure.
He was able to get away from the forecheck, able to make, for the most part, that first pass. And so, Cagnoni is a guy that definitely did catch my eye. And I think that those are going to be his calling cards as he progresses, up the junior ranks and hopefully the AHL and the NHL. That escapability, that ability to move the puck. Hopefully that progresses. But in last night's game against some prospects that were a year or two older, more mature, giants like Valtteri Pulli and and guys like that, right? Like
Musty as well.
He was able to lean on sort of his calling card skills, and that's good to see for a guy that again literally just got drafted.
And also fell so much, right? Like there was a lot of people that had him in the 50s, 60s, or even higher. And he fell all the way to 123. I agree. I think his skating really stood out, his escapability, his ability to change direction. He was also just very calm defensively. Like he's never going to be the guy that's going to bully anybody, but he was he's basically reading the play really well and knowing where the attack was going to come from and how to cut off lanes really well, and try and make himself bigger, even though he's pretty tiny. So like if he can continue that type of thing, he becomes he's not tiny, so he's not going to make the NHL. He becomes he's tiny and he has enough offense to actually do something with it to make it an NHL lineup. So I think he had a really good showing overall. Pohlkamp actually surprised me too. Like I was impressed with his mobility. His shot looked really good. He had a really great looking shot from the point. I think it was in the second period, somewhere around there, that I was just really impressed that it got on net and how quickly it did.
I should have circled him.
But I mean, I wouldn't say like, blew me away or anything, but he looked pretty good, especially for an overager. And I mean, he should look good for being an overager, but it took him this year to get drafted and everything. So I think he looked pretty good. Other than that, I think we have spent enough time on Team Teal. So I think we should move into Team White. Also, Magnus Chrono was on Team Teal. I thought he looked pretty good, but this wasn't really a day for the goaltenders. 7-4 final score. But I thought he looked pretty decent. So Team White had a little bit of I'll call it like a dominant first line, I think is the best way to put it. With Quentin, Musty, Filip Bystedt, and Ethan Cardwell, Sharks Sharks prospect of the year from last year. So why don't we get the elephant out of the room, the musty elephant out of the room,
the birthday boy,
the birthday boy, and talk about Quentin Musty.
Sure. Quentin, obviously we saw what he did. Now I don't know if he's gonna start the season with the Sharks. Like, it's sort of someone asked me that on Twitter today. It's like, let's slow the roll a little bit there. But obviously though, his size, and also too, one thing that McCarthy mentioned before the scrimmage was how impressive Musty was and how smart he was in terms of absorbing things. And Marchant said later about Musty, we were doing some things with the forwards where they were doing some hard cutbacks and getting a quick shot from the middle of the ice, and he did it instantly. And so that's a sign of a guy that's obviously paying attention, but also too, highly skilled and able to kind of, do what's being asked of him and learn it quickly. And so that's one thing that's what I find interesting though, that even before the scrimmage, basically Musty carried over what he was doing in the practices and the drills over to the scrimmage.
Yeah. It's the old adage of see one, do one, teach one. I don't know if you know that phrase, but it's basically like
that from Star Wars. I don't know.
Yeah, no, it's not. It's just it's a phrase, but basically his just ability to pick up something really quickly. I mean, you're drafting him for all of the things that we saw, right? So like his shot, his like playmaking ability, his hands. You're drafting for all, and his size. And then you're hoping that a lot of it can fill in around him. And it seems like because he can pick up things pretty quickly, that it will.
Yeah.
He looked really, really good. I will say that he did. His game kind of thrives off the rush in general. Like even in juniors, it was the same way. And in this format really lended it to him being able to play to his full extent off the rush, like every shift, just being like, all right, we're going.
Every goal was sort of a carbon copy of every goal was sort of a carbon copy of, it's the same thing, like he pulled the same NHL like NHL 94 like trick on the goal every time. It worked.
Yeah, I think Cardwell set up his first goal, and I really, really liked his pass that he led to him. And I think, I mean, we can talk a little bit more about Musty, and I'm sure we will, but I think Cardwell had actually a really good game as well. Just very engaged and playing the role that I think Cardwell's going to play in the future really well, which is he's going to be your retriever of the puck. He's going to be your transition guy. He's going to be your energy guy. And it can also finish some plays at the end too. I think he got robbed on one specific cross ice pass.
McCarthy mentioned that, that he got stoned a couple times there.
Yeah. I think him and Musty went like hand in hand really well together. Bystedt had a quieter game, I think, overall, but definitely still can see like his ability to transition is really good. His skating has improved a lot since his draft year, I think. Like I could see him being a little bit faster to me. Did you have any of them circled?
Yeah, I did. I had all of them circled, and
one big circle.
McCarthy mentioned that we saw. I don't remember exactly which period it was, but Bystedt took the puck to the middle, and whoever was on him just sort of shook off that defender. And McCarthy mentioned that his composure to the middle and making some skill plays to the middle of the ice, and we saw some of that. We didn't see it like every single shift, but we saw enough of it. That was like, wow, there's definitely something there. In terms of Cardwell, so I mentioned Cardwell and sort of his how wide he was, and part of the reason why it really got my attention too is because he's a guy that we watched very carefully last year because he was with the Sharks, pretty deep into the exhibition season for guy that would just just out of junior or was about to be just eligible to leave junior last year as he was, and his speed was sort of his calling card last preseason. And while nobody thought that he would make the Sharks, there was some thought that he would sign his ELC after the exhibition, after preseason, because that's how impressive he was, right? But even back then, I watched him and I thought this guy's too light. Like, of course, there's no way he's making the NHL at the beginning of the 2022-23 season. But even for junior, he's light, and he's not like Michael Grabner fast or whoever, where you don't have to be as heavy because you're blinding fast. He's not that fast. And so anyway, so it very much impressed me, and I think that the organization, I think, obviously share the same sentiment because that's what they've told him to work on, and that's what he clearly worked on. Not losing that speed, of course, and not losing that skill. I think he scored 95 points last year for Barrie or something like that.
Something around there, sure.
Yeah, but adding that width and that size, and so I'm very curious to see how that's going to translate. Obviously, adding he said he added 6 to 7 pounds of muscle. Adding that for the OHL is one thing. We'll see how it translates to the AHL. But it is impressive to see that sort of, Todd Marchant mentioned that, everybody, was working out and getting stronger over the year, and everybody's making gains, right? And so not to take that away from all other players in camp, but Todd did, and Todd shouted out Ethan Cardwell, of course, in the first episode of the San Jose Hockey Now podcast, right? But Todd said, you see guys like Ethan, definitely taking a bigger step. It's there's no subtlety to it, and anyway, so that's very impressive. So I'm very excited to see what he can kind of bring to the Barracuda. I think also too, I like the adaptability there too, where he's not a guy that's saying like, hey, this is because he had a pretty good season with Barry the year before, and it's like, I'm a fast player, that's my game, I'm gonna stay light, right? Wants to make the NHL, and he understands that
for sure
that he needs to add other elements, and seriously add it, not just like give it like a passing sort of addition, but like he's really taken to that. And so you like to see that kind of attitude.
He's such a well-rounded player as well. Like, it's not like he's just relying on a single skill. It's not just his hands, not just a shot. He has like a well-rounded skill set. I wouldn't say that anything is super stand out, other than like his motor is really great. He just competes very hard, but I would say those are the kind of things that make him a valuable prospect in the future, is just his well-roundedness and his ability to improve. So the second line had Brandon Svoboda, which was the pick at 71 that the Sharks traded up to get. So a guy that they definitely are high on. They were worried that he wouldn't go to them at 94.
Right.
And they traded all the way up to 71 to get him. So I thought he was interesting. I had not watched much of Svoboda during his draft year. And I can see why they picked him where they did, because he is like a long-term project. It feels like he's got like a lot of retrieval skills. He's got a lot of smarts in the offensive zone. He's a big body. He feels like a guy that through time and through a little bit more improvements could fit into your bottom six really, really well and provide a lot of value. I thought he had a good game overall. Like his tip in front was pretty great. I really liked that tip. And he had a specific steal on a player. I think it was in like second or third, somewhere around there, that like just lifted up a stick and effortlessly took it off of him. And I thought that was impressive. Thought he had a decent game overall.
Yeah. John said of Svoboda, Svoboda has been good all week. I think he's competitive, like his approach. And so the word competitive, right? We know that that's sort of the word around the Sharks these days.
One of two words for the Sharks, right? Yeah. Competitive and skill. That's the two. Yeah.
Ozzy Wiesblatt mentioned that in his post-game interview. He mentioned that, like that's the word that he keeps hearing, compete, competitive, compete. And to hear Svoboda just drafted, honestly, a guy that I didn't circle either, because I thought, well, even though he was a third-round pick, like he's not considered like a high-skill guy necessarily. And so if he's gets lost in a shuffle in 5-on-5, 4-on-4, 3-on-3, I'm not gonna like kill him by watching him being like, oh, how come you're not dipsy dooting people like Will Smith is. And so but to hear McCarthy say that, I think though is a testament to how well Svoboda did in this camp.
Yeah, and competitive skill. Speaking of competitive skill, Ozzy Wiesblatt was on the third line for Team White. I think this was one of my favorite games I've ever watched of Ozzy Wiesblatt. And I've watched a lot of Ozzy because I watched him a ton in juniors and on the Barracuda last year. Just you could tell because he got called in, right? This was like they called him up late and said, "Oh, we need an extra skater."
I'm not actually I should know this. I don't know who he replaced, but
I'm not sure either. They said somebody was ill or was injured, and he got called in, and he clearly was just having fun out there. He was just like he was the older guy, but just a ball of energy like he always is, and he has a lot of confidence with handling the puck, so he's just out there like making 7 dekes in a row trying to go through a bunch of dudes. I thought that was a lot of fun.
Obviously as an older player here, you expect them to be good, and he was good. And so I'm curious to see how obviously how that translates to the Barracuda this year, because last year was a disappointing year for him. But one thing though that in his post game, and Josh Fragella wrote about it, that stood out though was just sort of his he was relaxed. He was really relaxed, and he mentioned, like last year was really hard for him, and he had to work on just being in a good mental space, staying in a positive mental space.
Sure.
And he was clearly in it this week, and he, I think that does bode well for him to sort of, recapture his stock a little bit. And so it was good to see that this week.
Yeah, absolutely. He definitely had a year where it didn't all come together, and it took him a long time to really gain any confidence with carrying the puck at the AHL level. And that's kind of the game that he wants to play, is the ability to carry the puck. And
I will say though, sorry to interrupt, that scouts were telling me by the end of the season that they definitely saw that,
improvement.
he was a player, which he wasn't at the beginning of the season.
And obviously next year is going to be a huge opportunity with him. For him, some players are going to be moving up and around, and there's already been some movement off the Barracuda. So the defenseman for Team White, we had either my first or second favorite pairing, Jake Furlong and Mattias Havelid. Furlong has been a player that has been mentioned a couple of times through the Sharks media. It's just a guy that's had a lot of improvements. He's interesting. Furlong, I've watched a lot of in juniors and in this game as well. He looked really impressive. He has a very good surveying of the ice and knowing how to get in lanes to stop pucks coming through in transition. He stops up in the neutral zone really well and can kind of like kill rushes that way. And I really liked his game, and I felt like I think the announcers called him out too for having just a really good defensive game today.
Actually, McCarthy mentioned it too. He mentioned both Havelid and Furlong, actually used that word, managing, did a nice job of managing the game. And you can see sort of that calm that they both play with. And with adding to Furlong, when we talked with Todd Marchant on our podcast a couple weeks ago, he mentioned how much Furlong loves doing video with Luca Spiza, the defensive development coach. And I asked Jake about it this week at development camp, and Jake sort of laughed. He's like, "Yeah, I actually kind of probably annoy them with how much I want to do video, and how I want Luca to watch every game of mine." And Jake mentioned that Luca usually spends him like sort of a 15-minute clip video about every week, sort of, from Luca's viewings of his games of the week. And it's great to hear that sort of, first, that kind of detail, right, that both Furlong and Spiza are putting into Furlong's development, but also too, just how, obsessed, Jake, seems to be with improving his game. And so that's a great sign. And I think he was a 4th round pick. So, fifth, he was a 5th round pick. So this is a guy that definitely, has already sort of, at least at this right now, is eclipsing his draft position. And actually, a couple months ago, I had a post-trade deadline, San Jose Hockey Now top 10 Sharks prospects, vetted through multiple, scouts and, Shark Source and, things like that, right? And I had Furlong, I think, as like a sneaky number 10.
Interesting. Yeah.
And and he showed why, why he's there.
Yeah, and I think his partner as well was Havelid, and it was pretty clear that Havelid's been playing professional hockey. It just felt like he understood the game very, very well defensively, and he had a couple of flashes. I wouldn't say that he stood out all that much, but he did look really, really comfortable. Him and Furlong made a great pairing, I think, the entire night.
Yeah. Havelid looked like he had sort of the escapability too that that I noticed with Cagnoni. So.
Yeah, his skating is really great. He's known for his shot as well. I think he got it off a couple times, but I liked his game as well. The The only other person I think to shout out on Team White was Dylan Ernst, who was the tryout goaltender who had
Oh, I have
probably.
one more guy. So yeah,
Oh,
but
you got it.
go ahead. Go
Go
ahead
on.
with Dylan.
Oh well, I was just gonna say he had the save of the night that I
Mhm.
think basically was just like a highlight reel save towards the end
Yeah.
of the game. I thought
I
was
will.
awesome.
I will add of the tryouts. I asked one
Mhm.
scout that I trust outside the Sharks organization about the Sharks tryouts, and anybody catch his eye, and he said no.
Okay.
So yeah,
Okay.
so he could be wrong, but
Yeah.
yeah. So I know Ernst had a great record last year for I think Cam Loops, but and the
Yeah.
Sharks did not draft a goalie, of
Mhm.
course, in the 2023 draft. So maybe there's something for Ernst there.
Sure.
But yeah, I wanted to share that thought. But the other player that I was watching was
Oh
Valtteri
yes.
Pulli,
Yep.
and Valtteri, obviously a little bit older, and there's some, we'll see what happens with him. But he's a guy that you can see if things play out right with sort of his size and how he's grown his game, that he can be fast tracked to the NHL maybe, if things work out for him. And so watching him though, these are his first games though in the small rink, small ice, and
Mhm.
so I think that was definitely that. He talked about that's something that's going to be a challenge for him. But I
Yeah.
did
For
want to mention though that John McCarthy a couple of times in the pregame morning skate and also after the game, shouted out Pulli's, he said moves well for a bigger body, and also his hands are good too, which I think is kind of a subtle detail that
yeah.
obviously Pulli, it's not hands like when people talk about hands and a score or like Will Smith's hands or whatever, right? Like not like that, right? But
Yeah.
hands in terms of just handling that hard pass, making that first pass, and
Sure.
so that those little those kind of subtle defenseman skills are so important for a guy that's even if he's never going to score a point per game or be anything close to that, just being able to, handle a pass, make that first pass, and then use his size, his skating, and his reach, right?
Yeah.
That combines to a pretty good package. And so, yeah, I think that was a pretty a high, I think McCarthy liked Pulli, and McCarthy will probably be coaching Pulli a lot this year for the Barracuda.
Absolutely. And some sort of amalgamation of a quote from Jake Middleton is the NHL will pay you $1 million to flip the puck out of the zone and play good defense. But I think Valtteri Pulli has definitely does have some interesting qualities about his size, his skating, and
Yeah.
his hands were not too bad.
Yeah, yeah. And the Sharks have had a history of one thing they've been able to develop well from kind of quote unquote nothing, but guys who weren't drafted high or free agent signings, right? Big guys
Mm-hmm.
who can skate, molding them into good defensemen or at least passable defensemen, right? So Jake
That
Middleton,
does,
you mentioned one.
yeah.
Nikolai Knizhov is another one, right?
Megna was
Free
another
agent.
one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Jacob Megna, right? Getting more out of Jacob Megna than other teams, and eventually getting a fourth round pick out of Seattle for him.
Yeah.
And so maybe Pooley will be in that line. Of course, there won't be Eric Carlson there
Did
probably
that
won't be Eric Carlson to
did
help
that
him
fourth
out,
round?
but
I'm trying to wonder to see if that fourth round pick became Cagnoni. It
oh,
might
was
have
it?
been. It might have been actually. Is it,
That was 123. I think you're
and it
right.
would be from Seattle. That's about right, right?
Yeah,
In
because
terms of the
because
number.
the next two defensive picks, Landon and Pohlkamp were fifth rounders. So
Yeah, I think that was Cagnoni. Anyways,
you're
it's
right. It
just
is.
a
I just checked it up. So they flipped
impressive.
Magna for Cagnoni. So yeah.
Honestly, really great, and I'm happy for Magna. Obviously, continue his career in Seattle and all that, and he, I think he's still got one more year on his deal and
Yeah,
everything. So
yeah,
good for him.
a minimum deal. So yeah, I
Mhm.
mean he has value and he's a great partner for Carlson too. But
Hint,
yeah,
hint,
definitely.
Seattle, great partner for Carlson. Hint, hint.
Yeah.
Anyways, all right, Sheng. So I think we've talked the prospect scrimmage a lot.
Let me close
Yeah.
off with a couple things
Yep.
here, just about the guys who didn't play last night with the
Sure.
prospect scrimmage. Just a couple of notes from McCarthy and Marchant. So one thing that I was interested in is all the older players that they brought in who did not play in the prospect scrimmage, right? Guys like Thrun and
Yep.
Bordeleau and Eklund and things like that, right? So I asked Todd, who are the guys who kind of stood out as leaders this weekend, right? And or this week. And this is one of those questions where, like I said at the top of this, where obviously he's going to say good things about everybody, but I'm sure everybody did do well in sort of that leadership veteran role right here. But, the first guys that he mentions, those are the guys that really, really stood out for him. And so he mentioned number one, David Quinn's favorite guy, Henry Thrun.
Love Henry Thrun.
Far and away, right? Loves Henry Thrun. He also mentioned Nick Cicek too. And so I wanted to give a little shout out to those guys and, things that they do for leadership. I asked Todd, what are some of those things? And Todd said just little things like making sure everybody's on the bus or everybody's in the vans, making sure that everybody's where they're supposed to be. So it sounds like kind of my job when I was an after school teacher.
Maybe a little bit. Yeah.
But, always count all the heads on the bus, before you leave. Before you leave the museum, always count all the heads on the bus, right? So it sounds like Henry and Nick did a great job of that. And also want to add a note about Thomas Bordeleau. I think this is actually a really important note. Last year, obviously, Bordeleau started the season off great, was scoring goals like gangbusters, right? But I don't think he was playing in quite the he was scoring goals at AHL, but he wasn't necessarily playing the kind of two-way winning hockey that maybe competitive, kind of hockey that I think he'll need at NHL, because he's not Alex Ovechkin. He's not going to just he's not going to wing it at NHL with just his shot or his skill. And I think that it took a little bit of time for that to sink in with Thomas. That's sort of my understanding of things. And so McCarthy said of Bordeleau that he seems to have taken a time away from the season to regroup, and he wants to come back with a fresh start and commit himself to playing a 200-foot game. And Thomas Bordeleau's skill is obvious. Like we saw it in that, stint, his first time with the Sharks, right? When Bob Bugner was still the coach. We saw it with the Barracuda last year, AHL All-Star. And no one questions Thomas Bordeleau's skill, but I think that there were fair questions last year about his two-way game, his compete, and how that would fit in with the Sharks in the coming years. And so it's good, and a lot of defense, right? And I don't know what you think of this, but a lot of defense is just attitude, right? It's just the willingness to. No one's asking Thomas Bordeleau to be, Joe Otto, to be, some whatever great third line center of days past. No one's asking to be Nick Bonino. No one is asking Bordeleau to be that, but you need to show a certain modicum of responsibility, a certain modicum of effort, a certain level of all these things, right? And you have to have the right attitude that this is winning hockey. This will help my team win games, even if I score a few less goals in the season, that sort of thing, right? And so I think that Bordeleau, they talk about sort of the post-hype prospects, right? Obviously, the Bordeleau hype, was at a fever pitch. Yep, and in 21-22, right? Derailed a bit last year, I would say, right?
I mean, it chugged into about February when he was the AHL All-Star, and then after that, it seemed like.
But then you watch it though, right? Even when he was scoring goals, it's like, well, okay, he's doing that, but that other stuff he's not doing is going to keep him from being in the lineup for any NHL.
My thoughts on Bordeleau is that the NHL is it likes guys to fit into certain molds, and Bordeleau has an issue where his size, his position, and the way that he plays doesn't fit a mold that is currently around in the NHL very often. I think he fits best at center. His offensive game, I think, is flourishes at least a little bit more at center than it does at wing. But his defensive skills and his ability to play a 200-foot game really does hamper him from moving from the minors to the NHL. Basically, the 200-foot game in his position as a center. Like if he was a good enough winger, he could probably get away with the way that he plays on, in all zones. But I just don't. as of now. He obviously he's seeing it too. He realizes that there is a path forward that he needs to take to make
The thing
things.
is that I think we know he's skilled enough, but I also think
sure.
he's smart enough and strong enough. Even though he's a small guy, he's
Yeah,
actually deceptively strong
he really is.
for
Yeah.
his size. Yeah, right.
Mhm.
And I think he's very smart too. So I think that I wouldn't surprise me if he's again, sort of that post hype guy that
Has a
uh,
bounce
er,
back.
yeah, everyone's kind of down on him. He's
Mhm.
dropped down the Sharks prospects list, top
Yeah.
10. Obviously, with additions of Smith and Musty and Halttunen and guys like that, even
Yeah.
even further down the list than he was to end last
Mhm.
season. But yeah, he's a guy that wouldn't surprise me if
But he is
he.
strong. You're right
Yeah,
on that because he
yeah.
has good puck protection and he
Hmm.
can he's got low center
Hmm.
of gravity, so he can actually get the puck back. It's kind of like more of a mental thing, I think, in
Yeah, that's
terms
what I
of
mean. Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
That's why it's great that he has that. Appears to have the right attitude. I think.
Hmm.
This
Absolutely.
year. This year.
And the other I think interesting quote was somebody wrote an article about the size being prevalent in the prospects game,
Oh,
and
sure. Yeah, yeah.
it was interesting because Bordeleau, Eklund, Gushchin, and Robbins were all sitting in the press box, letting everybody else have their day in the sun. And it's like, well, we didn't just suddenly get only giants, and also Cagnoni had a great
Yeah,
day,
the
and
defensemen that were drafted too. Yep.
yeah, had a great days, yeah. So, and we again drafted some smaller defensemen this year as well. So. All right. From a more, let's call it bigger perspective, Sharks made a
Hmm.
couple of moves this week, headlined by two trades.
Yep.
We looked this up to pronounce it correctly. Leon Gawanke.
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 Um,
That's what the Manitoba Moose announcer said, and those guys are always right about this kind of stuff.
yep.
It's their job. It's their livelihood.
It was acquired in a trade for Artemi Knyzhov.
Hmm.
And Anthony Duclair was acquired in a trade with Florida for Stephen Lawrence and I
Hmm.
think a 5th-round pick.
Yeah, 5th-round pick, 2025 5th-rounder.
Let's start with the Anthony Duclair, just because I think it was the big headline of a
Sure.
trade. What do you think the Sharks are kind of not? This is going to sound. What do you think the Sharks are doing? No, just what do you think the bigger signing is here for Anthony Duclair? What's the bigger picture here with him?
Well, the bigger picture is that Anthony. Well, first of all, Florida needed to create cap space, and
Mhm.
so they were. Even though the Sharks love Stephen Lawrence, we all love Stephen Lawrence, and he is every bit the compete guy that the Sharks want to kind of have more of guys like that, right? But he's also a fourth line player. And he may be a great fourth line player, but he's still a fourth line player. And so you can get a guy like Duclair who has scored 20 goals 3 times, scored 30, over 30 once, for basically, yeah, for a fourth line player. You kind of have to do that, and with Duclair, he is like I said, he has 1 year left at a very reasonable contract, and so the Sharks need to, in their rebuilding, take chances on guys with a lot of upside, like Duclair has on a discount.
Mhm.
And this discount care is obviously, they didn't have to trade like a ton back for a guy that only scored 2 goals in a regular season. He was, coming off of Achilles injury. So only had 2 goals in 20 games last year, but had a good playoff, had a 4 goals, 7 assists, and Panthers Stanley Cup final run there. And again, has that track record and is youngish. And so he's a guy that now on the Sharks, he is now probably the best winger, right? Obviously, there's Barrett Bonoff. Sharks are hoping Eklund takes that next step, but right now it's between him and Barrett Bonoff for sort of the top winger, right? And
Yeah.
so Duclair should get plenty of power play time, plenty of time. Duclair's been mostly a 15-minute a night guy in recent seasons. Playing a secondary scoring role on star laden teams like, well, recently like the Panthers, right?
Yep.
And so he's sort of covered. On one hand, he doesn't have as much responsibility because of guys like Barkov and Huberdeau in past years, and even like Kachuk, guys like that, right? And so now
Yeah.
he's going to get a chance to play probably 17, 18 minutes a night, and see if he can, really kind of up his trade value for the Sharks to flip him at the deadline. So we didn't trade, the Sharks didn't trade Steven Lawrence in the 5th necessarily for Duclair. It could be for the draft pick that comes from Duclair, right?
Possibly.
And yeah, and if you get a first or even a second for Duclair at the deadline, you weren't getting a second for Lawrence in a 5th, at any point, likely, right?
Yeah,
And
for sure.
so so you're basically just improving sort of I don't know. I'm sure there's a financial term for this, but just
Yeah.
but
You can think about
yeah. You're adding
Mhm.
a more a guy that
Your
should be
return on investment. There's
right.
a financial term,
Yeah.
sure.
should be a more valuable asset, and of course you never know, Duclair can get hurt. He can,
Mhm.
he can kind of melt in the spotlight of being sort of the number 1, number 2 winger on the Sharks, right? Who
Yeah.
knows, right? But this is a really, really good bet, really smart bet. And these are the kind of bets that the Sharks need to make because they need to, accumulate better picks and at better prospects as they try to work their way out of the cellar. So
Yeah, I think there's something to be said that the Sharks just really need someone who's able to put the puck in the net as well.
yep,
I
yeah, of
think like
course, yeah,
they traded Timo. They've just been steadily declining in their goals for I don't know, years. It seems like,
right,
and somebody's got to put the puck in the net, and it probably is going to be Duclair if he stays healthy and gets top
right,
power play minutes and all that. And he's still the same player that he was a year ago when he scored 31 goals.
yep, 31, yep,
Which is, that's nothing. That's not nothing in the NHL. That's impressive. So
mm-hmm.
I think you're right. It's either maybe this is a guy that, he's young-ish. Maybe this is a guy
right,
that you want to keep around if he really
right,
loves it being a Shark. And
mm-hmm.
maybe it's like a flippable asset that gets you a second or a first at the deadline. And either way, it seems like a win. I love Steven Lawrence, and I'm sure that the Panthers are
No, I
happy with
love
Steven
Steven
Lawrence.
Lawrence. Yeah, I've
But
spent a lot of time chatting with
yeah,
him
and
during the
Steven Lawrence
year.
is still like a fourth liner that you can win a Stanley Cup with. So if the
Yes,
goal is
absolutely,
for
absolutely.
the Panthers to win a Stanley Cup, then they still have a fourth liner they can do that
Yeah,
with.
they save $2 million in the cap, and they
Mhm.
get a useful player that can help them, get back to the Stanley Cup final.
Exactly. He's not going to be a throwaway piece if he's on
Mhm.
a playoff team. He's going to be a valuable piece. So
Right.
just a different kind of piece. Whereas maybe they're looking for some different offense up front, and they can afford to do that trade.
Right.
The other one was an interesting one, and it was for Leon Gawanke,
Mhm.
a right shot D from the Manitoba Moose,
Mhm.
and a D for D trade, which was an interesting move from the Sharks. And I think Knyzhov had he's like he to me felt like a prospect that kept going in like spurts and starts, right? Like he would stop his development and then he would leap a little bit ahead, and he would stop and he would leap a little bit ahead, and like I'd watch him and I'd be impressed for a bit, and then sometimes I wouldn't be as, because he has a lot of obvious tools with his skating being the number one that just didn't really pan into a good puck moving defenseman for the Shark or for the
Mhm.
Barracuda, but could still be. So
Right.
they traded for Leon Gawanke in an interesting move. Basically,
Gawanke is older, so
the
yeah, so I mean
older
that's
he's.
part of it. Knyazhov has a little more of a runway 22,
Mhm.
2019 pick. Gawanke is a 2017 pick,
Yep.
24.
Yeah, and he's a right shot where the Sharks were loaded on the left
Right.
side. So I think that was also just kind of a positional need as well. Um, could this be the Erik Karlsson replacement? No, I'm kidding.
Well, the Sharks have no one after Carlson. They have no one obvious to take over on the power play. Last year, Matt Benning was PP2, so sure he could do it, but in an ideal world, Matt Benning is not your top power play. He just isn't,
Yeah.
So he's good in other areas. He was a gem of a find for the Sharks last year. He's, I think, better defensively than people give him credit for, but
Mhm.
offensively, he shouldn't be PP1. Not to say that Gawanke should be either, but
Yeah.
Gawanke has, some degree of potential to, take on at least an offensive role in the NHL. Talk to scouts after the trade. They told me that Gawanke, in their opinion, is an NHL caliber in terms of his puck play. Like there
Yep.
isn't a question
Yep.
about that. His problem is that he is not good defensively.
No.
And so, can he do enough to kind of cover up, for defensively, not be such a liability and score some points, and also to be a guy that potentially could be flipped too, and maybe. He did lead the AHL, tied with the AHL scoring defense lead with 20 goals last year. Granted, though, Jacob McDonald, also on the Sharks blue line, I think he's a multiple AHL All-Star. Scored a ton of goals in AHL as a defenseman. And that hasn't translated, so there's no guarantee that Gawanke's production at the AHL level will translate at all in the NHL. But it fills a role that the Sharks really need, though, right? In terms of right-handed defenseman and also offensive defenseman that is NHL ready or close to NHL ready, which they don't have. Sans Eric Carlson. And so I think it's a pretty good gamble. I'd like to see what Gawanke brings to the table. Knyazhov, he had last year was a growth year for him. He was better last year than he was the year before his rookie pro year. But his ceiling seemed, even people who liked him, more kind of bottom pairing, right? And obviously the Sharks have added a lot of defensemen. That's, a lot of people have talked about that. A lot of defensive prospects in the last few months, right? Mukamadulin, Thrun, Ahotiak, guys like that, right?
Sure.
So Knyazhov was definitely getting lost, kind of like Havelid too, right? Havelid, that was sort of a throwaway in the Timo Meier trade. Remember how hyped people were about him a couple of years ago, right? Because Havelid can skate well. I mean, it's sort of all that he was able to do. But
it seemed like it was like Knyzhov and Havelid were the two guys that can skate well, similar size. One was offensive, one was defensive. Right. And if you squinted really hard, maybe you could get a third pairing defenseman out of them.
Right, something like that, right?
Something like that, but it never really panned out for him.
It didn't pan out for the Sharks, but can it pan out for, can Havelid make something of his NHL career? I think it's possible. Sure. He has one very clear NHL skill, right? Or ability in his skating, right? And so that's a very important, obviously, NHL skill. And Knyazhov, he's not as good a skater as Havelid, but he has a kind of a more of a combination of skills, good puck mover, good skater, and adding to his ability to play defensive, to kill plays and things like that. That's, I think, one thing that Knyazhov did a lot better this past season. But he wasn't really going much of necessarily anywhere in the Sharks organization, right? And so he would have needed I don't know what's going on with him this summer, but he would have needed kind of a transformative summer, to leapfrog. It's possible.
New organization, anything could happen.
Right. Winnipeg, depth chart, whatever. Yeah, maybe that's easier for him.
Yeah, I feel like it fit for both sides. I don't really know the Winnipeg Jets defensive depth chart, but it felt like it was a good move for both sides.
I will say with Gawanke too, right? He had signed a contract with Adler Mannheim. I think he was done with Winnipeg and tired of, the guy played 4 years with the Moose. He's a German native, so he's able to play longer, and the Jets have his rights for longer. But anyway, he played 4 years with the Moose. He scored 30 goals in the last 2 years from the defense. He led like I said, he scored 20 last year. Tied for the AHL defensive lead, and he couldn't get one AHL game. And the Jets, I'm not sure why. I don't know the sort of the inner workings, but of the Jets. But that's got to be frustrating. The Jets aren't. Yeah, the Jets aren't the 2007 Anaheim Ducks. Niedermayer Pronger. You score 20 goals in a season.
It's like one game,
you're in the last year of your contract. Yeah, getting a game.
Knyzhov has a game.
Even Knyazhov has a freaking game. Yeah, in the COVID year. Yeah. So he was leaving, and because writing was on the wall for him in the Winnipeg organization, and so but he's gonna get every chance probably with the Sharks if there's no Eric Carlson, because they have. No, they don't have, at least at the moment, maybe they'll sign somebody or trade for somebody, but at the moment they don't have anybody who is a viable PP1 option. Right now the best option might be to go with 5 forwards. So
Yeah, 05 forwards or Matt Benning, I guess.
Right.
But it does show, I think, and obviously it was mostly tongue in cheek when I was saying he's the Erik Karlsson replacement. It was more just that I think it shows that the Sharks management continues to, ever since the trade over to Mike Grier, has like continued to just address the depth chart in specific ways that is interesting, where they're just like, we need to improve this. We need to improve this part of our pipeline, our defensive pipeline. We need to improve our compete. We're going to get these guys. We might be trading Erik Karlsson. We don't have a lot of right-handed D. We're going to get this guy. Even if it's not like, a slam dunk, it's at least trying. They're trying in different parts of the depth chart that I think is very targeted in a way that's good to see, for sure. The couple other free agent news, basically. Sharks signed a couple of guys. Givani Smith and Kyle Burrows both got NHL contracts, as well as 3 likely AHL NHL deals, but likely AHL players, and Nathan Todd, Ryan Carpenter, and Scott Saborin. You can tell I'm getting tired because I'm slurring my words a bit. But Sheng, your
it's
thoughts?
Scott Sabourin, by the way.
Sabourin. Oh,
yeah, I dealt with Sabourin when he was with the Ontario Reign. I think maybe his rookie AHL season. So yeah, that was my first beat.
The insider
2015-16 Ontario
on
Reign.
Scott Sabourin. What are your thoughts on the Givani Smith and Kyle Burrows contracts?
Well, Givani definitely adds sort of that toughness element, right? That they lost letting VL and Gadjevich go, but also too Givani, from what I understand, he plays with a bit more pace than VL and Gadjevich did. A bit more on the forecheck, a bit more better skater than both of those guys, and so I think that's the element that I think might have been attractive more so to the Sharks and how David Quinn likes to play. Just pace. Quinn talks a lot about pace, and so I think that's that. People will say, "Oh, why Givani Smith over Gadjevich or VL?" Right, and so those are the little areas that Smith might have just a little bit more of than those guys. Burrows, I think, is a really interesting one. You look at that contract and immediately you think of Matt Benning, and the Sharks gave Matt Benning a 4-year contract. I think 1.25 million AAV. Everyone was. A lot of people, at least, were a lot of fans were like, he gave 4 years to Matt Benning, and while I understand that the term is longer than you like, and Burrows actually acknowledged the same thing, and Matt Benning has said the same thing too, that you can't when you're like a kind of seen as a bottom pairing guy or whatever, right? You can't ignore the security for your family and whatever that the extra year gives you, right? Or the extra year or two that the Sharks will give you, you can't ignore that. And so Burrows mentioned that was one of the attractive things, obviously, about coming to San Jose, that the San Jose was, I believe, willing to give 1 more year than Vancouver was willing to give. But it also shows, though, how much Mike Grier likes these guys, right? That he's willing to give them that extra year, and he wants to bring that competitiveness that both Matt and Kyle Burrows, seem to have into the Sharks kind of defense and into their lineup. And so, so I'm curious to see if Kyle, like Matt, showed a little more game than was expected of him. Everyone thought that Matt Benning was strictly a bond pairing defenseman. I think he showed last year that, granted, the Sharks were not a good team overall, but I think he played reasonably good, middle pairing minutes. I think he can be, whereas, at first when the Sharks signed him, people see, oh, he's a 5, 6, 7 defenseman. Maybe, maybe he's a 4 through 6, actually, a guy that can, be a credible
bottom 4. Sure.
Yeah, credible like middle pairing in a pinch. You may not want to be in your middle pairing like every night if you want to make a deep run, but if he's in if injuries or whatever, Matt Benning is in your middle pairing for like 20-30 games or whatever, right? You're going to be fine probably, if you have the talent around him, and so maybe Burrows, Burrows played about 17 minutes a night last year, which was a big jump for him. The year before he only played 13, and before that he was pretty much an AHL guy. So he's taken a long way around to the NHL, but maybe he's got a little bit more too, and so he can kind of show, show that little bit more that that Matt Benning did last year. And the last point I want to say about that too is that I said this last year when the Sharks signed Matt Benning. If Matt Benning doesn't work out, guess what? It just hustles money. It doesn't hurt the cap. You bury that, and the bury amount's 1.1. So Matt Benning would hardly count against cap if he bombed. The Burrows deal is even better because it's exactly 1.1.
It won't count.
So it won't count at all. And
in the NHL,
it doesn't work out.
In this NHL, this is the most important thing: is your ability to finagle the cap. And if it works out, it works out. And if it doesn't, he plays in the Barracuda and doesn't cost you anything other than
it's
you're
just
paying
an
him.
extra year of Hassel's money. It's not your money, and so it doesn't hurt the cap. Doesn't hurt the Sharks competitively. So
Hasso, if you're listening to this podcast, we respect your money and we enjoy you very much. But no, I think it basically just is some guys to fill out the roster for the Sharks, and give a little bit of a grit to the bottom six again after losing Gadjevich and Veal. So don't have any real major hangups with the signings. I think they're fine overall. I didn't really expect them to make any big splashes. However, this is
we'll talk about that in a second.
let's jump to that topic and we'll go to the other one later on. But let's talk about the rumors of who they might sign.
Okay. Yeah. So I didn't believe it until, I saw Elliot Friedman's name associated with it. But Elliot said on NHL Network a couple of days ago that I think he said that the Sharks were interested in Vladimir Tarasenko. And I think he also said that he didn't necessarily say the Sharks were. He speculated that he thought that Matt Dumba would be a fit for the Sharks. And I will say with Dumba that agent
First of
actually
all, noted outsider Keegan McNally also said Matt Dumba might be a fit for the Sharks on our first episode of San Jose Hockey Now podcast.
An agent texted me like a couple days after free agency, and we had been talking about who the Sharks put on the power play, who they put quarterback the power play if they trade Karlsson, because there just aren't any options. Now you have Gawanke, but he's never played an NHL game before, right? So he suggested Dumba, and I thought, well, I guess maybe, but one of the things that's striking about Dumba in terms of just his production, right, is 2017-18, he's 23 years old. He puts up 14 goals and 50 points, right? And he looks like he's going to be, a top pairing guy, I guess, at least, right, for like the next decade or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
And every year since then, his production's kind of declined. Of course, some of it's injuries and whatever, right? But we get down to this season. He's 28 now, and he had just 14 points in 79 games. And again, this is from 50, 5 years ago, and you wonder, well, what's up with this guy? Like, did he just lose it? He's only 28. Did he just lose it? And so that's what I checked around on. I don't have as much to say about Tarasenko. Tarasenko's a little bit older. We know he's not the Vladimir Tarasenko of his prime, right? Like 35 goal, book it guy, right? Yeah. But he's still, as you saw last year, he's still viable. He's going to be, he's going to put in 25 or whatever, right? But Dumba was the most curious to me. And before I get into just sort of the research I did into Dumba, I will say too that even though I don't know if it's going to happen, but it makes a lot of sense actually for the Sharks to pursue these guys. I know that a lot of people are like, well, the Sharks aren't trying to win games, they're trying to tank. But number one, Sharks are never going to, at least under my career, they're not going to tank. They're not going to run out, no offense to either of these guys, Aaron Dell and Zach Sawchenko as their goaltending tandem at the start of the season, trade Erik Karlsson and re-sign Ryan Merkley, for the power play. They're not they're not going to they're not going to openly try to lose games. Okay.
Yeah, they're
I
still
guess is
gonna
the way to put it,
try.
Yeah, they're gonna try, right?
Yes.
And so yeah, so guys like Tarasenko and Dumba actually make sense because they're not getting obviously the offers that they were hoping in free agency, or they would have been signed day one, right? Tarasenko's a bit older. Dumba is not necessarily too old, but Dumba's obviously, like I mentioned, his production has dropped off quite a bit, right? And so people kind of don't know who they are anymore. Like, do you really want to give 5 years to a effective but declining sniper like Dumba, or do you want to give 5 years to a guy in Tarasenko, or do you want to give 5 years to a guy in Dumba that is even a top pairing or even a middle pairing guy anymore, right? And so anyway, so what makes sense for the Sharks and these guys here is that Sharks are a perfect place for both players to rebuild their value on a short-term contract. 1 year, 2 year at most, probably 1 year, right? Cap is supposed to go up a lot next summer.
Yeah.
And if you're Matt Dumba and you're 28 and you've proven again with the Sharks that you can, score 40 points, be a viable power play threat, and also play good defense, right? You're going to get a really nice contract next summer. Even a Tarasenko, right? A bit older, but if he pops in 25, 30, whatever, right? With all the playing time, power play time that the Sharks have available for anybody, you're also going to increase your value and get kind of maybe a nice kind of last contract with somebody, right? So,
and the other thing I think with that kind of thinking is that if they do sign like a 1 year deal, say Tarasenko signed like it's not going to be $8 million. Say it's like an $8 million contract. Right. Sharks retain 50% of it, trade him to a contender after he's had a great season, and then he might still have an opportunity to sign another contract despite having a very high current salary.
Right. I mean, if those guys perform like you expect them to with the Sharks, right? Or you hope that they would at least, right? You get that draft pick at the deadline. Model for this, and it did not work out for Anaheim, but John Klingberg, right, last offseason. So he's hoping for a multi-year max, whatever, right? And he didn't get anything close to that, right? And so he's like, okay, I'll go to Anaheim, and 1 year, $7 million, and it didn't work. That happens too, right? But it was the right play for him, I think, right? Even though it didn't work out, and it was the right play for the Ducks too. You have a guy like John Klingberg, who has been at times almost a point per game defenseman, close to that, right? And you take a swing on him, and so if he puts up 60, 70 points on your top power play, you flip him at the deadline for a first, a second, or something like that, right? And so I think it makes perfect sense that at this juncture in free agency, we're almost a weekend, they haven't got the contracts that they wanted, that Dumba and Tarasenko, if they want to come, makes sense. And I think Dumba is the one that really, really makes sense to me, because Sharks, like I said, we talked about with Gawanke, they have literally nobody to play the power play, and there's also nobody left pretty much in the free agency market that has experience, playing a regular power play shift. I don't believe so. I don't think so, at least. Guys that that stood out day one and were snapped up day one, that are cheap and have that experience. Shattenkirk, I mentioned. Klingberg went day one. Gustafsson, who, from what I understand, if the Sharks had been able to conclude an Erik Karlsson deal quickly, that there was mutual interest, between Gustafsson and the Sharks, and so all those guys kind of make sense. If you're a rebuilding team, you just need a guy that will make the power play viable for your William Eklunds, your Thomas Bordeleaus, and whatever,
Absolutely, yeah. It needs to be somebody there to distribute for your high end players to at least have the ability to score. Especially your prospects. Super important.
But okay, so focusing back on Dumba, right? And so Dumba, what's up with Dumba? Is Dumba just a guy who's declined and he is 14 point a season? He's just a defensive guy now, and don't think about the days when he had 40. He had 40 years that he scored double digit goals from the defense.
Yeah.
That's pretty good. That's a pretty good offensive defenseman, right? And so anyway, I reached out to Team 33, and Team 33 is basically it's a scouting service, right? And it's a scouting service with it was founded by Michael Santos. And Michael Santos, if you look at his history, very impressive NHL resume. He was assistant general manager with the Islanders, director of hockey operations in the late 90s, early 2000s, director of hockey operations with Florida, with the Predators for a number of years, AGM with the Islanders, like I mentioned, but also with Florida eventually too. So he has, over 20 years of experience of front office hockey ops, experience.
True.
And so he founded Team 33 with sort of the idea that, just like in the name, that it would be basically like it'd be a consultancy service for NHL teams, and they're basically like the 33rd front office. And he's the founder. The advisory board includes guys you've heard of, like Jack Ferreira, first GM of the Sharks, former Ducks GM, Peter Mihaljevic, Jerry Meehan, Serge Savard, Stanley Cup winner, and Neil Smith, another Stanley Cup winner there too. So, very impressive roster of people. And so basically their thing is that they send scouts to the NHL games, and those guys write reports as if they worked for the Sharks or whatever team, right? And they had 21 pro experienced scouts, basically guys who are not working for an NHL team, but have worked for an NHL team before, have scouted for an NHL team before. Guys, just throw out a few names. Michel Goulet. I think you scout for Anaheim. Dwayne Sutter. John Van Boxmeer used to scout for the Sabres. Al Iafrate, Sharks legend, Al Iafrate, the Wild Thing. So 21 pro experience scouts, right, at the same games that the other scouts are at, taking the same notes and whatnot, right? And it's we'll
get there in a second, the final point, but there was a funny Twitter thread maybe a year ago before, right after Seattle, or maybe 2 years ago when Seattle got a team, that it was showing a picture of a seating chart for scouts, and one of the scouts seating charts said Team 33. And somebody was like, "Oh my gosh, it's a new franchise. They just got Seattle."
Oh, really?
Yeah, I remember.
I don't remember that.
Yeah, it was like a little insider seating chart. They were like, "Oh,
yeah. No, that's the same seating chart at every game. It just
yeah, it was really funny. And I remember reading it, and I was like, "What is this?" And then somebody explained it in the comments. So that's how I know about Team 33. But anyway.
Yeah. So anyway, so I reached out to Mike, and I wanted sort of Team 33's perspective on Matt Dumba, and basically, what's up with Matt Dumba? Why has he declined offensively so much? Where is his game at right now? I don't watch the Wild every night, and so I only know Matt Dumba for this past year for hitting Joe Pavelski, in a wrong way, right?
Sure.
So. Anyway, so Team 33, finally, last note about them is that they are right now they're consulting for NHL teams. So NHL teams pay them for the services, right? I know that they work with a couple of NHL teams right now, but they're also developing a web-based platform that'll be available for subscription one day. So the subscription to you, me, other fans. And they're also working on an amateur program too. So I think that's like amateur scouting, amateur, for draftniks like you. So
yeah.
So anyway, so keep an eye out for more from Team 33. No, they are not the new Atlanta team or the new Sacramento team or new Salt Lake team or whatever.
The Quebec City, we're
Quebec
doing
City, yeah. I really didn't know that whole Twitter thing.
This was gotta be a few years ago, maybe a year.
Yeah.
It's pretty funny.
But
anyway, so what were the opinions on Dumba?
So Dumba is okay. So Dumba is still actually rated by their scouts, Team 33 scouts, as the second pairing defenseman, and Dumba did play 20 plus minutes last season with Minnesota, even with the lack of offensive production. So he's being played as a second pairing defenseman in terms of the minutes, right? And most importantly, just in terms of his physical skills, right? Like where's the drop off, right? And he's still a good skater that thinks the game well and plays with good detail defensively, which helps him contribute on a PK. And so here's a guy that so he's still good defensively. He still has value defensively. Minnesota's a good defensive team, playoff team, right? And so they're still playing Dumba 20 minutes a night, and they must like something about him, right? But here's the interesting thing about Dumba and his production. His power play time was cut huge amount last year. I looked at it. Last year, I think, or 2 years ago, he played about 100 minutes on the power play. He's probably ideally on a playoff team. He's a PP2 guy, right? But for the Sharks, if they trade their PP1 guy in Carlson, a guy like Dumba has the experience to kind of masquerade, give a credible performance as a PP1 guy. I think that's the theory here, right? But anyway, so this past season, though, he played only 8 minutes on a power play.
Wow.
And so I'm not quite sure about why exactly that happened with Matt. Again, I don't watch Minnesota carefully, but he still seems to have like the physical attributes to be effective, at least a player on the power play. And so if you combine his age, which is good, and also his upside, right? As again, if he finds his game with the Sharks as a 29-year-old defenseman, I think he's right-handed too. Is he right-handed? Let me see. I'm not sure about that one.
Dumba, I believe, is right-handed. Yeah,
he's right-handed also, right? So yeah, if he finds that that level of production with the Sharks, like this is a guy at the deadline that can get you a lot, actually. If he returns to form, if he resembles at all the Matt Dumba from 5 years ago, and with the element of more mature defensive game and that sort of thing, right? That this is a guy that you trade him at a deadline. A lot of teams there's going to be a line for a guy like that, because teams always want good solid defenseman at the trade deadline, more so than a sniper like even a Tarasenko, who still got a first round pick last year, but
on reputation, a lot of it, but
but a legit top four defenseman though,
they go for a lot.
Is worth a lot. And so if the Sharks want to give him like 1 year, $6 million or whatever, whatever the Sharks can fit once they trade Erik Karlsson. He's also, from what I understand, good locker room guy, good guy off the ice, love his involvement with the Hockey Diversity Alliance, right? So yeah, I mean this sounds like this has a chance to be a real win for the Sharks, even if they don't win many games on ice.
And this is continuing, I think, the theme of what we've talked about for the past like half of this segment after the prospect scrimmage, which is, what are we going to do in a post Erik Karlsson world, or what is what are the Sharks going to do? And I think that's going to be our final topic before we get to the Will Smith interview at the very end. But where are we at with the Erik Karlsson trade, and does it seem to have stalled a bit? Is it still on go? What are we doing?
Well, it seems like I don't know of the day to day, the hour to hour kind of
minute by minute
kind of talk minute by minute, right? Which people want to know that. I wish I could provide that.
You're not texting Eric right now asking?
No, I'm not. Yeah, I'm not. But it does seem like Carolina and Pittsburgh are still in it. But I will say that what's concerning is that there hasn't been sort of a third, fourth team really put into it. I know people mentioned Seattle and Toronto early, but it sounds like, at least at the from what I understand, that Seattle and Toronto aren't as in it. So if it's just Carolina and Pittsburgh, then you're gonna have trouble with commanding the return that you'll want for the reigning Norris Trophy winner, right? And we talked a lot about this a very first episode, I think, about, why I didn't think Erik Karlsson was going to get a lot in trade. Obviously, the contract, all that kind of stuff, right? But we're seeing to some degree, though, that, I mean, of course, any team in the league can use a 100-point defenseman. Like, that's a no-brainer, right? But but look at what the contract, the retention, how much will the Sharks retain? How much can the team that's acquiring Karlsson afford to pay him with their salary cap plan, right? It's reduced the player that on the ice, would be of interest to literally 31 other teams, right? To maybe just 2 teams, right? And so I think I think that, like, if there was a return that the Sharks like from them, that they would have taken already. I think I would just, that just makes sense, right? If they can find the right retention amount, right? But that has the trade obviously hasn't happened yet. And so I think it's a big concern that there's only 2 teams that we keep hearing, because eventually, and we actually have already seen it, Carolina and Pittsburgh, they've signed a lot of players. They have a lot less cap space, obviously, than they did on July 1st. Obviously, the Sharks can take on contracts in return for Karlsson, alleviate, guys like Jeff Petrie, that's been rumored, right?
I think Granlund as well has been rumored.
Right, Granlund, right? I'm not sure the Hurricanes. I don't know if they have too many bad contracts, but
they honestly just have like a really stacked team. So I don't know if they.
So they just want to add
bad, like quote unquote bad contracts for us to take back. That's the other thing, is I don't know how Carolina is going to fit, especially because they're supposed to be getting Tony DeAngelo in like
that'd be fascinating, right? Burns, DeAngelo, and I was talking to somebody about that. Like, I don't see Carolina, because they're going to have Burns, DeAngelo, Karlsson, all right-handers, all power play, all guys that are worthy of being on PP1s.
Yeah, sure.
And all of them on your same blue line. And I was like, maybe I just lack the imagination,
It's creative.
I mean, right? Like,
Sharks tried to do 2 of it, right? They tried to do Burns and Karlsson on one blue line, and it didn't really work. So,
well, I'm going to argue that point, though, and I've said this point since
maybe
last
what
year.
worked for 1 year.
It did work.
Yes.
It's not. I don't think it was automatic that once they traded Burns. I mean, obviously, it helps to get more power play time and all that stuff, right? You don't have to share PP1 with another defenseman, right? Like Eric had to share with Brent when they're both here. So that obviously helps, but it can work, though, as we saw in 2018-19. It definitely can work. So and I'm sure Carolina knows this too, or that's
and they have a deep enough team up front that, like, they're not like the 2020 Sharks trying to communicate both of them with nothing up front. There's
like, hey, if back a couple years ago, like, if you're the defenseman that got PP1, then you're fine, because you still got to play with Logan Couture and Tomas Hertl and Timo Meier and all that stuff, right? But if you were the defenseman that got stuck with PP2, because Karlsson and Burns didn't do a lot of PP, they didn't really work gel on the PP on the power play too well. If you're the defenseman, point per game defenseman, historically, that got PP2, you weren't turning PP2 into a PP1, because you just didn't have the guys. You just didn't have the guys around you to do it, right? So
100%.
So I think that's a good point with Carolina, that, like, up front, they don't look that different than the 2018-19 Sharks, that loaded team, right? They have a lot. They have a lot of guys. So.
And they really want to go for it, because I know Sebastian Aho's contract is ending. Obviously, we have no idea what's going to happen after that. I think this is his last year of that. So I feel like they're really trying to load up. So, and we see it every year. It's just interesting that they're this far into it, despite all the cap limitations, that they're still mentioned as the team.
They're always in everything. That's sort of
So
sort of what I hear.
And it doesn't feel like there's a surprise team, but that's why they're a surprise team, I guess. Maybe somebody.
But I guess to put a bow on a point, though, I think the Sharks need another surprise team to get into it, and we saw this with the very briefly to wrap up, the Timo Meier trade, right? And I wrote a lot about this, that the Sharks really needed Buffalo and St. Louis as examples of teams that had a deep war chest of prospects, picks, that sort of thing, right? To get into it and to really want Timo, and to see Timo as that missing piece, because then that would force New Jersey to ante up. Right. and New Jersey in the end wasn't really forced to ante up because Vegas only the teams that were in the end, Vegas only had picks to offer. Carolina, of course, was in it, but Carolina wasn't offering the defenseman. Escapes me. They're Nikishin. Yeah, they weren't offering him up, right? And so so the Sharks had to take kind of the best package that was available for an asset that they didn't have to trade, I guess, but that there was good reason to trade him at the time, obviously, because his value was at the highest probably that it would have been.
And if Madulin and Musty turn out, then it's
sure, exactly, yeah,
a good trade.
Yeah. And so in that same way, this is Timo Meier, much younger, much easier contract situation to stomach than Karlsson's, right?
Yep.
It's hard to trade stars. Obviously, it's hard to fit guys like that into your plans, and so
I think for our sake, I hope that it's every week we're not just on Erik Karlsson watch. I hope that in one of these weeks of this podcast this summer that we
you guys talk about a trade. I think it'll happen.
Major trade alert,
Yeah, someone asked me, Alex, a big time commenter, reader, San Jose Hockey Now. Thank you for subscribing. You asked if I thought a trade was sort of imminent or it'll happen later in the summer. This is just a pure guess, but I think it's probably going to happen sooner than later, just because people wanted it to happen. Karlsson wants it to happen so he can kind of start, over teams, interested, whether they're very interested or not, or kind of interested, right? They need to settle their cap situation and what they're going to do going forward, right? I could see it happening, again, sooner than later. I'm not saying it's going to be next week or tomorrow or whatever, but
that may also be the a reason why it hasn't happened yet is that teams might think they can wait out Greer, just because the closer it gets to the season, the more, it's going to get a little bit antsy about, okay, are we trading him? Is he going to play another year in San Jose? It's going to get a little bit more antsy. So
I think that's an interesting press conference. First day of training camp, and Erik Karlsson is still
around. Is he practicing? Anyways, I think we have talked everyone's ear off today, Sheng. It has been a very good podcast. We're going to end it with a interview that you had done with our 2023 first pick, Will Smith.
Yep.
So, anything else? Any final words, Sheng?
No, I've talked your ear off. I've talked everybody's ear off. So yeah, thank you again, guys. If you got through all of this, enjoy the Will Smith interview. It's not a very long one, but I think it's a fun one. I think I asked him a lot of questions that not a lot of people are asking him, and so I think you'll get some fun insight into Will. And join us next week.
Yep. See you guys next week.
We have Will Smith here for the San Jose Hockey Now podcast. Thank you for jumping on, Will. Just how's the experience been in dev camp for you so far?
It's been awesome. I think just getting to know the guys and the staff and the area has been fun.
You mentioned going to Santana Row. What'd you do yesterday? And what do you have planned for the rest of the week in terms of seeing the Bay Area?
Yeah, we went bowling yesterday.
Oh, nice.
That was fun. And then today we're going to Alcatraz. So should also be a little adventure that we're excited for.
What'd you bowl yesterday?
Like a 120, I think.
Okay.
In the one game, and then our team was hot.
Okay.
But we think we finished in second and third, but we did our best.
Who's the best bowler out there?
I think Robbins won the highest score.
Nice. Yeah. What do you have?
It was something high, like 160, I think.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Their team is pretty good.
Impressive. Wanted to ask you too, actually, just going to other questions. Why number 2? That's an unusual forward number, right? So.
Yeah. I get that a lot. The Brian Leach is where I found that number and kind of stuck with it. He's at Boston College.
Oh, sure.
That's where I got it.
Oh, that's pretty cool callback. I mean, Brian Leach, he played in the. I mean, you weren't even born yet when he was in his prime, right? So did I know Brian he coaches some youth hockey. Did he coach you at all, or how do you know? How do you know Brian? Have you met Brian?
I haven't met him. Surprisingly, he actually coaches the team that I used to be on. The junior Eagles.
Yeah, right.
I hopefully we'll meet him the next year.
Yeah. Why then? Like, what about him? What made it just that's the number that you picked?
Like I said, he was a Boston College guy. I mean, two is kind of like a QB or like a point guard.
Oh, sure.
And
Yeah.
I've liked all sports, and something about two is just I don't know about that. Actually, I love it.
Okay. So I mean, every team you join in the future, someone's going to ask you why 2 for sports, but you're going to keep it, and that's your number, right?
Yeah. Well, we're in 6 next year because 2's taken. So.
But when you can, you're going to return to it,
Yeah.
right? How long have you had that number anyway?
15 years, probably.
Wow. Okay.
Ever since I was a kid.
Yeah. Okay. Like, did you just see like a Brian Leach photo, or I don't know?
I think it was my dad.
Your dad.
He got me into it.
Okay. All right. Do you know anyone else here in terms of there's a few Mass or USD NTP guys like Bordeleau, Lund. Do you know anyone well here from before? I know we just talked with Henry. He says that you guys flew in together.
Yeah. I mean, I know Henry from earlier skates from past years. So, I mean, he's a Harvard guy, and just being around the Boston area, you get to know those guys. And I mean, I got to know Bordeleau because he was at the national team. And,
Right.
Just hanging out with those guys, getting to know them more because I know Lund too.
Okay.
From earlier time.
Okay. You look forward to playing. You have Cam and Michael Fisher, Northeastern, so you might be seeing them, right?
Yeah, I will be seeing them.
So to raise an athlete, right? They talk about how it takes a village to raise a child, right? Obviously, for elite athlete like yourself, it takes many people, right? So I just wonder, obviously there's always the parents that we talk about, your coaches, right? But I wonder now we have this time a little like longer platform. Is there anybody that like you haven't really shouted out yet, or just somebody maybe a little not as like that you want to just show your appreciation to that helped you get to where you are now?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the parents are the first ones in the line, and my sister too. She doesn't get enough credit for helping me, but yeah, all of them have been awesome. And then I mean, my grandparents, they've also been really special on the journey. So just kind of got to give them a shout out.
Okay. Your sister, you're right. Yeah, I don't think I've heard her mention just how she helped you.
Yeah, I mean, she's older than me, so she's been a role model for me and kind of help me get to where I am today. Just, I mean, no matter what it was, if I would need some help in school, or she didn't want to give me a little tutor or something like that, but everything else, I mean, she's always been there, and she just loved hanging out, doing everything.
What was your weak subject in school that you needed help on?
Probably math.
Okay. Yeah, me too.
Yeah, just studying for those tests were brutal.
Yeah. And you mentioned your grandpa, and you had his business card on you during the draft. What was his job anyway?
He was a president of a building in Boston, so he kind of passed it down to the family, and then I mean, it was just one of his last starts, so it was want to have something for him in there.
That's awesome. And what was his impact on you just in general? I saw a number of photos. It seemed like he was at a lot of your games, of course.
Yeah, he went to everyone he could. I mean, just he was probably the most generous person I knew. Just he did everything for our family. He put us through school, and no, I definitely wouldn't have got the resources I would have without him.
And from what I understand, he used to give you after games a $5 bill for some candy. So what were your go-tos back then?
Ooh. Oh, it depends if I played good. If I played good, he'd give me something. Probably like a Milky Way or
okay.
Yeah, something like that. Sometimes he'd already have it.
Oh, nice. Okay. But you can't do that anymore, though. You're a elite athlete now.
I gotta watch the nutrition.
Something else I want to ask you too about is I totally love your dog. Your dog has his own Instagram, Rigney Smith. So why Rigney? Where does that come from?
So I have history in the Chicago White Sox. My great grandfather is Charles Comiskey. Who,
really?
Yeah. So wow, he's a famous guy in Comiskey Park.
Yeah.
My sister's middle name is Comiskey, and then his daughter was Dorothy, I'm pretty sure, and she married John Rigney, who was a pitcher, and also I think ended up helped managing the team, but John Rigney, and then that's where we got Rigney.
Oh wow, okay. And then also too, you had a dog growing up, Molly. I saw a picture of. So anyway, it's same kind. What kind of dog is it? It's a
Cavachon.
Okay, that's sort of your.
Yeah. I mean, they're
go-to dog.
They don't shed, and they're just really caring and loyal. So when I get older, I'm probably gonna get like a big dog that can protect the house.
Right. And just a couple more here. Thank you so much for your time, man. So, okay, favorite nickname, not Smitty or Fresh Prince.
Oh, that's tough because that's what I get called.
Right.
I used to get called like Wild Willie.
Okay.
My grandfather.
Oh, nice. Okay. That's from your grandpa. Oh, where did that come from?
I thought I was wild because as a kid. I mean, I was always running around. There's my other grandfather on my mom's side.
Okay.
He's a funny guy, so he used to call me WW.
Okay. Do you know William Karlsson, obviously Vegas Golden Knights, his nickname is Wild Bill.
Yeah.
Did you see William Karlsson Stanley Cup parade? Might we expect that from you? Do you think that I mean, you're a little enraged though, so shouldn't ask him about that, right?
Yeah, we'll see what happens.
We'll see what happens. Okay. Now, notice I haven't asked you any Will Smith Fresh Prince questions. I know you always get asked that. So actually, my question, now I know that you're a baseball fan. This is a good question. Favorite Will Smith, baseball Will Smith, pitcher or catcher?
I only know the catcher.
So. Okay. Okay.
Right?
Yeah. So he wins automatically. And finally, last question for me. I noticed that you partner with Chipotle. So do you know how big a fan William Eklund is of Chipotle? And I actually asked him about it today. He's gonna hit you up. Like, can you hook him up? Like part of the sponsorship deal.
I didn't know that he was a big fan.
Oh, he's a big fan.
I'm going up to see those guys at lunch right now, so I'll mention it.
Okay. Make sure they're lord over him that your sponsorship deal. So.
Yeah, I will.
All right. Well, thank you for taking the time again.
Thank you.
All right. I'll see you around. All right. Good luck with everything.
Thank you.
Thank you.